Welcome to the Empowered Spirit Show. This is your host, Terry Ann Hyman. I'll explore the connection to the human spirit in a way that helps to navigate your life, including crisis. I am passionate about helping you to open up to your intuition and the metaphysical world of spirit to find your confidence in your own inner guidance. Take a pause, be inspired, learn ways to show up focused, centered, and more dynamic in your everyday life.
Welcome back to the Empowered Spirit Show. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me today. This episode is being sponsored by Ritual and Shelter. Are you looking for a magical place to shop and hold space? Check out Ritual and Shelter online or in Homewood, Alabama. Browse through their bookshelves covering topics such as energy healing, crystal healing, Reiki, chakras, auras, the Akashic Records, shadow work, astrology, and earth-based healing. You can also find herbal teas and tinctures alongside their crystals and oils to help establish a mindful mindset and fluid ambience before meditation, ritual work, and reflection. Ritual and Shelter is dedicated to providing one-on-one, in-depth conversations with customers to help them find the most efficient healing methods and resources that match their unique interest and energy. They offer tarot sessions, Reiki, sound bowl, and crystal healing, and now they are offering witch consultations. Visit ritualshelter.com to book an appointment and bring peace back to the body, mind, and spirit. You can also find them on Instagram at Ritual Shelter Shop, as well as Pinterest at Ritual Plus Shelter. As this podcast goes to air, we've just moved through Valentine's Day. Whether or not you're in a relationship, it is time to honor love. Love with yourself, love with your friends, your partners, your family, love with everyone. I think the world needs more love right now. We've also just moved through a full moon in Leo. Leo is about getting out there. It's kind of a party moon. Full moons do bring in lots of light, which shines on the shadows, helping us to kind of illuminate maybe some of those parts that we don't always want to see. It can act upon our emotions. Maybe it's a little difficult to process your emotions, but really finding ways to do it is so important. Having tools and techniques to help process this energy is so important. Buckle up, Buttercup has been my motto these last few weeks. There's a lot of disruption going on in the world right now. And maybe it is stirring up your emotions. Maybe it's stirring up your thoughts. Maybe it's kind of getting you down deep. But we need to have the sensitivity and the beauty of the Buttercup, but really that strength to be grounded in Mother Earth. So many disruptions, and it's so easy to jump on the bandwagon of some of those lower vibrations, the fear, the anxiety, everything that's going on. So allowing the light to radiate from you, to hold strong in your beliefs and the truths of what you want to see come forward is so important right now. We got to be careful. We don't know the outcomes of what's going to happen. We have to really be able to sustain our light and what we want to see out into the world through these next several years. So definitely it is a time to buckle up. It's a time to have a spiritual practice. It's a time to really be able to ground your energy. When we are grounded, we aren't thrown off path as easy. We can sway with the wind, go with the tides, yet we can still maintain that truth and integrity of what we believe in. I know it's hard. I know I've had to look at a lot of different things. Social media platforms, for instance. Where do I stand? What do I believe? And it is a time to ask ourselves these questions. And that is where having a spiritual practice can help you. Having the tools and techniques to get out of the limited beliefs, to run through your energy, to show up, to intuitively know your guidance is what is being called on right now. When you go within and connect to your soul, you will find so many more answers. It's hard to trust. So much AI, so many fake things. It's hard to trust right now, especially if we don't have that truth within us. I know for myself, being able to ground and trust my intuition helps me in so many situations. And so as we move through all this discord going on in the universe, Now is the time to clean up your energy with an energy clearing session. Let go, lighten up. We don't want to keep accumulating the same energy over and over. And that's what an energy clearing session can help you with. Reground, recenter. Not sure what to do? Maybe you want to build your own spiritual practice. Schedule a spiritual upgrade call with me, and let's talk about what's getting in your way, what your spiritual practice looks like, whether you need a session or whether you need some private mentoring. I can help you with that, and I will put the link in the show notes. In today's episode, we are diving deep into an intriguing way to connect with your partner and expand your consciousness. Just a quick note, this discussion we're having today isn't meant to serve as a prescription, and it may touch on topics that really aren't legal in every place. So proceed with caution, use some discernment when you listen to this episode. And I am thrilled to welcome my guest, Wade Richardson, whose book, The Psychedelic Mind Meld, and it's all about telepathically exploring shared connections. So in this episode, we talk about connecting at a deeper level with your partner, about psychedelics, telepathy, and how this can help heal wounds and trauma that are held in the body without talking. We use our intuition, we use our imagination, so many things that he shares with us in this book. So before we begin, let's take a moment to pause and center and set an intention for love, for yourself, and for those around you. So wherever you are, if you can, close your eyes. Taking a nice deep inhale, breathing up the body. And as you exhale, breathing all the way back down, slowing down, centering. Inhale, expanding the breath up the body. And as you exhale, aligning the energy, bringing the spiritual body right on top of the emotional, mental, physical layers, centering, grounding. Inhale, expanding the breath up the body. And exhale, breathing all the way down. Inhale, expanding your breath, opening up. And this time as you exhale, dropping right into the heart, right into the deepest part of your heart. Feel that connection with your spirit and the greater spirit, source, creator. Know that you are loved, guided, protected, feeling all this energy coming in around us as we take a moment and noticing this great wheel of life, noticing your path, noticing your heart, allowing it to open a little bit more and setting an intention. As we create this beautiful circle all around us, we call in our Reiki masters, the teachers, the angels to help us with this joy in our heart and love, the crystal beings for amusement, magnification. Opening up with the higher self to help you with these messages. And now bringing that message for your intentions for love out into the universe as you exhale right through the aura, programming this energy all around you. Inhale one more time up the body and exhale, breathing all the way back down, grounding, centering, feeling that heart opening. Feel the illumination of the third eye. And as you're ready, blinking the eyes back open, coming back. So my guest today, Wade Richardson, is a psychonaut with more than 15 years of experiencing, participating in, and facilitating hundreds of psychedelic sessions. He lives in Santa Fe. So let us welcome Wade to the show. Welcome, Wade.
Thank you very much, Terry. I look forward to our conversation.
I think we're going to get into some deep conversation. So thank you. Thank you for coming today. And congratulations on your book, The Psychedelic Mind Meld. Telepathically exploring shared consciousness. Fascinating. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I did just want to acknowledge your presence here today as this amazing animated avatar, I guess we call it. Yeah, that we can do
Yeah.
now. But I do just want to acknowledge that in order for us to be able to go deep and share some of this is what we have today. So thank you. Thank you for allowing me to ask some of the questions too as well. So yeah. Yeah. As we go to begin, I do like to ask the question, what led you to writing this book right now?
There was a bunch of things there in terms of my career. There was some time that opened up, and all of a sudden it was like, okay, there's a bit of a vacuum I wanted to fill. And I had actually started another book that was exploring psychedelics more from a perspective of integration. And as I was starting to write that, it was that whole thing with writing, which is to write what about what you know. And I'd been having these telepathic experiences for a number of years, and it was like, maybe I should actually write about that. That might be a better fit. And so that's how I got started. And then, yeah, over the course of over a year, I managed to piece together the book. And of course, that was based on years of having done the work and years of having done lots of reading and research around the subject. So the writing just came after 15 years of doing the other pieces.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And to pull it all together and to have those deep, rich experiences too. And I also think part of writing is also a healing aspects for the author too, to be able to share, especially when we get into this kind of work, share it and have that light really be magnified on what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And
Mhm.
actually, the process of writing itself became a process of my own integration of my own experiences and reaching into a greater depth and understanding of what I've been working with.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, that's a really true statement too, because sometimes when I go to write or even do my podcast, I don't quite really realize what I'm putting out there until I've heard it a couple of times and processed it a couple of times and really see it in writing. So I can understand that too as well. So I am a spiritual teacher and a teacher of intuition. So the whole idea of telepathy I found to be very fascinating. What is your kind of idea or definition of telepathy first, and then we'll move into how you're really adding it into the book?
Yeah, telepathy for most people is, at least the simplistic level, is just a sharing of thought and maybe a conversation of the mind. But it reaches much further and much deeper than that. So for me, I really explore a kind of two themes. One is like physical sharing, and then that of psychic sharing. So when I talk about physical sharing, just to give you an example, I've worked a lot with my wife along with other people, but here's just a kind of a quick example with my wife. We had both been in a severe traffic accident, and we were doing a mind meld session. And the next thing I found myself dropping into her body. And that means me physically connecting to her body and the blockages of trauma that are connected or collected in her cells, actually within her flesh. And so I went to one of her wounds and started manipulating it. And the next thing, I was suddenly like screaming and yelling. And all of a sudden, I was going through the absolute horror that she experienced in the accident that we were in. And I didn't see any visuals, but I was processing it at an energetic level. So I felt all of the emotion. And strangely, we both saw this kind of cloud of black smoke leave her leg. And even though that probably didn't manifest in the real world, so to speak, it was definitely very palpable to our experience. And there was something that we were both processing and letting go of. So that's what I mean when I'm talking at a physical level. To go deeper in terms of sharing at the psychic level, there's a whole broad range of experience, but I think just one example will highlight some things. And that is, again, working with my wife. We dropped in another session, and without any intent, preset, or anything ahead of the session, we just dropped in, really just with the sole purpose of dropping in telepathically and sharing. And as we started to drop in, the next thing we found ourselves in a fractal version of Japan. And we're in this ancient tea house. We're there sipping tea together. And yeah, we're fully sharing and embodying the experience of basically journeying to other realms. And that may have been a past life thing. It's hard to know, of course, exactly what that is, but it certainly was a shared experience in consciousness and journeying together.
Yeah, I could probably help you with that. I work in past life. Yeah. But let's pause for a moment because you said a lot. The first thing, what did you notice after that for her? If you're visualizing and getting that sensation of the black smoke as you're working through that trauma, then as you come forward and out of it and then move into your everyday life, what are you noticing then?
I would say that this is long-term work, and I would say the same is true of most energy modalities. As humans, being in a physical body, we go through a lot of difficult experiences throughout life, starting from our actual birth. And then, of course, there's the various traumas in childhood as it may relate to family or peers or school, etc. And then, of course, that it never really ends in terms of the possibility of being confronted with disease, accidents, etc., etc. Uh, so I see healing as a lifelong process and it's glacial. So yes, we can have these one-offs, but it's not, wow, life totally changes the next day. Instead, it's an ongoing process, and that integration comes over time in the same way that the work continues over time. Just as another quick example, you might go to for a massage, and one massage isn't going to heal everything in your body.
No, I agree with that. And lots of times I have people coming here, I do energy work, and sometimes they can have pretty like amazing aha moments. I know the first time I ever had energy work. I remember that. I remember, wow, I feel peace. And then I heard a message like, you're going to be okay. And that was pretty life changing. Now, of course, I had to keep working with it and working with it and following up and integrating, as you said. And I like that you say that because many times, and I'll include myself here too. I heard, oh, ayahuasca, it'll change your life. Okay. But it's not always that way. It was pretty intense, but it's the integration and how we deal with it and then how we can take those steps forward. I would imagine that your wife did have some awakening and healing from that because you're moving energy, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I don't want to take away from individual experience either, because each one can be very profound in itself and part of a longer trajectory. And those openings, yeah, there are some stories come out of, say, the ayahuasca world where people will be completely healed from a particular thing in one session. I had something like that happen with me with an undiagnosed stomach problem that I'd been working with for a couple of years. And I took ayahuasca and I never had that problem again. That would potentially be an example of that.
Cool. Very interesting. Yeah, I think there's many experiences, but I am big on integration. I am big on then let's integrate this into our everyday life. Let's have the intention. And you talk about that in your book too, about the sacred ceremony and how we go into it and how we do work with it. And then getting back to the book, like the whole idea of the telepathy and the psychedelics and how they work with it. And this is a new concept. Why haven't we talked about this before? And I have had several guests on the show.
Yeah, it's surprising to me too. It does show up in the literature, but it's usually just a footnote. In the therapeutic world, we look at Stanislav Grof and others like him, and there's certainly stories out there, but they tend just to be a paragraph in the larger context of a book on therapy and psychedelics. And just as a quick example, there are stories of, and this of course was more commonplace before psychedelics were made illegal at the end of the 60s, but in therapeutic environments, you would have a client who would take a psychedelic at a therapeutic dose, working with a therapist. And the next thing, that client would be reaching at a telepathic level into the therapist and working with them at that level. And so there are those stories out there, but they're far and few between, and there's no book really written about it. And there's actually been the odd scientific study, but again, they're far and few between, and they haven't gained a lot of momentum in the kind of popular press.
That's interesting. It reminded me of like the work of Dr. Brian Weiss and his whole idea of past life regression and how his client went into his master energy, which helped him to prove what he was talking about. So very fascinating in that correlation too. Now the book is called The Psychedelic Mind Meld. What is that? What does that mean?
Yeah, again, it speaks to those broader categories that I was talking about in terms of an underlying shared telepathic connection, which can occur at both a sharing of physical contents and a sharing of psychic contents. And maybe I should just also make clear very quickly, the physical content can include all range of emotion. So I was working with a woman a number of years ago, and we dropped in quite quickly and quite deeply. And the next thing I'm knowing that I'm basically picking up on her struggles with resentments towards her husband, the grief of a lost sibling, some layers of self-hatred. And what was more fascinating than that, and you can imagine right now, we're not talking in any way, is that she's picking up on the fact that I'm picking up on all of these emotions internal to her. So all of a sudden, whoa, I didn't expect to be so transparent. And so then it was at a telepathic level I'm sharing with her. No, that's okay. These are normal human emotions. And basically, this is the whole breadth of what is possible for us as humans. And there's nothing wrong with it. And once she realized that there was no judgment coming from me, she just became much more comfortable. And then our experience got deeper and more beautiful.
Yes. Okay. So I get where you're going then. Telepathy, psychedelics, psychedelic mind meld. That's where we're going with that. Now, you also said something that I think needs to be repeated. You're not talking. So
No,
you're sharing through the emotions, the mental, the physical, the spiritual planes, the vibrations of energy. You're not talking.
that's correct.
Yeah. I think that's pretty
Well, I just want
fascinating.
to add too, someone just introduced to me what was it called? The Telepathy Tape podcast. And in this, there's a scientific inquiry into looking at telepathy without using psychedelics amongst autistic children. And these are children who are living in telepathy, who are not able to communicate verbally, and are yet sharing with their siblings, with their parents, sometimes with their teachers and their peers. And this is just going on all of the time. And the tests are indicating that when they're presented with, hey, what am I thinking or whatever, that the results are 100% accurate.
It's 222. I'll just make a note of that. And yes, somebody just sent me that too. Somebody just sent me that podcast too. And yes, I actually know somebody here in my local community whose granddaughter, and I love this child. You come around her and you just to be in her energy, and she's having to learn how to use like the iPad and stuff like that to communicate in a different way. But I feel that amazing abilities that she has, and for this trait, yeah. So I'm right there with you. I just heard about that podcast as well. If you would give us a little description of how this works, including the importance of the setting and how you set that up.
Sure. There's a lot of component parts there, so I'll try to be very brief in what that looks like, because there's both set and setting. So set speaks to our mindset when we're entering. I guess one of the key things here is that when you're working with other people, because this is definitely is advanced work when working with psychedelics, and I do want to highlight that. But the biggest thing, of course, when working with others is trust. You have to really fundamentally trust who you're working with, which makes this really good for working with a spouse or a very close friend, or possibly siblings or something like that. Because ultimately, you're opening yourself, all of yourself, up to the other person. And so you want someone who's going to be mentally stable. If there's going to be difficulty in the session, someone who is going to be able to work and possibly repair after the session is over. So there's all those elements of finding the right partner. And then, of course, in terms of the setting itself, you're going to want a very quiet place that's secure. If there's going to be loud noises made in terms of processing energy, which may include screaming or yelling, you don't want your neighbors to hear or someone to drop in unexpectedly. So yeah, those types of things have to be figured out. And there's quite a long list to explore, but I don't want to take up too much time on that and leave that for maybe the people exploring the book itself.
Yeah, and you do go into it and exploring the book. One of the things that kind of struck me, and I had to go look it up, was the idea of fractal time. Fractal yoga is what jumped out at me. And then I kept reading more in the book when you were talking about that. Can you give us a little explanation of what that means?
Yeah, the idea of a fractal is that the whole universe is made of fractals. It's like Indra's net, which is a Hindu concept of the universe made of kind of jewels, where if you were to look in any one jewel, you will see every other jewel as connected and in its infinite kind of variations throughout. So from that perspective, we have access to the universe, all of the universe within ourselves at a fractal level. And then in terms of the energy moving at this level of fractal energetic movement or yoga, just to give you a little bit of a sense, when I'm lying beside someone, and there's others who've done this, so it's not unique to me, I'll be holding hands with the other person, and all of a sudden my body will pick up on the energy that's in the other person, and just intuitively relate to where there are blockages in the other body, which is quite common amongst energy healers. And then my body will just automatically move to the other person's body and begin to massage out those blockages, which can often be quite painful and can be quite deep in terms of the working with the flesh. And then in terms of the fractal energetic yoga, more particularly, that can begin to be a divine energy that's moving through the body. Some might call it the movement of Kundalini energy. And the body just begins to flow on its own, either in asymmetrical or symmetrical positioning that looks a little bit like yoga, but can also include some things that look like a dance. And it's basically the body just clearing and finding its own kind of divinity and movement at a very deep energetic level.
So just to be clear, so are you finding yourself doing this like actually like moving, or is it all in that etherical realm?
No, the physical body is actually moving, but it's doing so beyond ego consciousness. So it's not like I'm
Okay,
choosing to move the body. The body is just moving itself.
gotcha. So the other question becomes, was it through the work with the psychedelics that allows you to open up and be more intuitive and more understanding and bring this in? Or is it just being in that psychedelic trip? Like, where are you gaining that knowledge? Is this something that this is growing for you as you expand your consciousness? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because for me, it definitely came through the working with psychedelics and it happened spontaneously. In fact, when it happened, I didn't even know it was happening to me. And I'd been working in ayahuasca ceremonies for a number of years. And in this one particular ceremony, my body just started to move on its own. And by this point, I was pretty used to how weird working with psychedelics could be. Being used to weirdness, it was like, okay, I'll just observe what's going on, and my body's just moving around on its own, but very symmetrically. And it was, yeah, in these kind of yoga-like positions. And at the time, I didn't even know what yoga was, but it was very purposeful in terms of how the body was moving. And yeah, it just went from there. And there's a lot of stories as it relates to how I started to connect with that with other people.
So I'm assuming that also means too, in terms of the energy healing, like picking up on those sensations or picking on energetically the traumas going on. So not just also in the physical realm, but then your whole, I would call it intuitive abilities, is what I would call it, which leads to the telepathy, but the ability for you also then to understand, like my practice is built on, like underneath every physical ailment's unresolved emotional energy. So we're starting to find what that depth of energy through the intuitive, through the other senses, through the expanded consciousness. So that also grew or is growing the more that you're doing this work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, this is coming through with psychedelics for me. For a lot of other people around the world, it's not necessary that psychedelics are a part of their journey.
Oh,
Energetic
I agree. I
healers
agree.
from around the world have experienced this stuff, and it shows up in different ways in different traditions, whether it's a Hindu tradition or Buddhism or a shamanic tradition. And the Kundalini awakening would be a more obvious example of that.
Yeah, I'm a Kundalini student. I work with the radiant light body. So that's actually what I teach. And I'm not trained to lead in the psychedelic ceremonies. And part of my theory is sometimes we have to have the other first, right? Like we have to have the tools. We have to be able to understand this. And then we can use that to help us. Some people come from the opposite. No, let's start there. Maybe you don't need the other tools, or maybe let's start with the psychedelics and the other tools will grow. I don't think there's any right or wrong way, but that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. We're all on our own paths. And for me, again, it was a spontaneous thing. And it may have been related to one experience that I had where, again, I was in an ayahuasca ceremony. It was one of the first ones I was in. And it was a very beautiful experience where I'm in a dark room with a bunch of other people, and I see this fractal, beautiful garden starting to grow towards me, and it covers the whole room. It starts coming up my legs and up my body, and I'm like, whoa, this is a lot. But I'm like, okay, again, used to the weirdness. And then my head's just floating in this garden, and all of a sudden, pow, there's this very high-pitched sound, which of course shows up in a lot of out-of-body experience or near-death experience. and I'm in the proverbial white light. There's a feeling of being connected to all of it, the oneness. But what it was in this case is also a portal. And I journeyed to this planet where there were these very large, beautiful pyramids that were breathing and covered in foliage, and they're much larger than any pyramids on our planet. And at the end of that was this beautiful palace of these indigo light blue beings. And I entered the temple, and it was like I was welcome home, and had this incredible sense of download of healing energy. And then eventually came back to my body. And yeah, it was interesting because all of a sudden I could see all of the energy and how it was moving throughout the room. There was a shaman who was working on someone, and I could see the light energy that was being shared. And I just felt really empowered of just sharing my own energy with the shaman, who I just assumed would know what to do with it. And this very bright ray of light started emanating and shooting out of my heart towards her. And as that ray was moving towards her, it started to increase in energy. And all of a sudden, these two indigo light blue beings joined me from behind on either shoulder. And the ray became stronger. And the next thing, my consciousness shot down the ray through the shaman and into this person's back. And all of a sudden, I'm in his spine, and I can see the damage in there. And I was okay with that for a bit, but then of course my rational or intellectual mind starts, what is this? And then starts to judge it, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm back in my body. And yeah, but that was a real introduction to the work, and how I think that there's a level of grace and these other light beings, if you will, who are all part of our process in helping us do this work and move this energy in a divine healing way.
Yeah, quite fascinating. Quite fascinating. I remember the music at the ceremony I was at, just, it was like it was a living being itself, the music. Yeah. So we can have many experiences. And I think that we need both, right? We can have those experiences, but for me, it's like even being able to then back it up and that integration. Now, you call it the debriefing, the integration debriefing, but having a way to continue this so that we don't always have to go around having psychedelic trips all the time, but then we can also embrace the way in which we can integrate it for our greater good, I would imagine. But you do talk about debriefing. Is that the same idea, the integration?
I would say that's a part of the integration. So the debriefing comes immediately after the session, where both people are sharing what arose, what was shared at an energetic, at a psychic level, where there may have been blockages. And this speaks to integration too, because maybe some of that energy isn't fully resolved. So that should be followed up by maybe going to a masseur or another energy worker, or maybe following up with another session. But then, of course, there's the larger, longer term integration, which speaks to the framework of how we live our lives and integrate these experiences into our lives. And I think we're all on our own path and figuring that out for ourselves. But I think a couple really high level things are to look at dropping into the literature, whatever resonates with people in terms of going deeper, in terms of philosophy, possibly religion, spiritual writing, connecting to other people of similar like mind to just go deeper in the understanding and what's possible. And then, of course, at the core of that is just dropping into being a loving being, of sharing with others and working to overcome the negative judgment that so often comes up in the ego mind, which causes so many of humans' problems.
Which opens our heart to compassion for ourselves and compassion for
Yeah,
everyone, really. Yeah, which we
yeah,
definitely need more
absolutely.
of. We
Yeah.
definitely do. So, yeah, it does sound very deep, and it sounds like it can be such an amazing process. And I agree with you about like couples, someone that you're deeply closely with, that you could do some healing and work through. That we all have those kind of things within our relationships that can be looked at, and this might be a way to get to it. But again, it's not for the timid and it's not for the amateur. I think having a little experience in both aspects of being more open and more conscious and more aware, and then also a little experience of what it does take to do some psychedelics. I think that some of that is all very important, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think someone really needs to be aware of working with psychedelics on their own first, because that gives a person an idea of what their own internal contents are like and how strange it can get. because someone is consumed with a particular level of anger or hatred or some difficult emotions, maybe it's depression, and they really drop into that with the psychedelic while they're working in the psychedelic mind meld. They might start projecting that onto the other person, and then all of a sudden it turns into a conflagration of some kind. And yeah, it can get messy. Someone understanding their internal contents first is important. And of course, working with the particular psychedelic that they're going to use with another person is very important, because you want to have an understanding of how that works, because they're all a little bit different. Yeah, so that's all important.
Good point. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, I think that is important. Now, is this mind melding ever done in a group or is it mostly two people?
I'm promoting that it's done only with two people. There's certainly lots of stories of hive mind or group mind. Certainly, when people go to raves and they're dropping in with psychedelics or MDMA, ecstasy, etc., there's stories of a group ecstasis where there's a group felt ecstasy. And that sounds something that's very powerful. But when you're doing this work, you have to imagine that each time you add another person, you're increasing the complexity in multiple ways. It's not like you're only navigating one person or the second person. You're now having to navigate the relationship between the two other people as well. So that's where it gets exponentially more complicated.
I so agree. Yeah. It is. It is all quite fascinating. And I think it is a good way to do some deep therapy. My goodness. But I do think, like you said, the guidance and having the experience is important. We can't just jump into it, right? Yeah.
Another quick component part in that I just want to mention as well is meditation. So having meditation skills is critical, because you want to be very comfortable with sitting completely still. You're entering then a trance-like state, and if the body is moving because you have an itch or something, you tend to drop out of it. But also what's really important is just with meditation, especially like Vipassana style meditation, you become really accustomed to being okay with what is uncomfortable, right? You're bringing equanimity to the difficult. And when you're doing this type of work, when it does get difficult, you want to be equanimous with it. You want to just drop in and be okay with it, because ultimately, what I'm advocating too is that we're trying to take the view of the bodhisattva, where all of it is me bringing love and compassion to all of the experience. So when someone else is going through something difficult, oh, that's me that's going through something that's difficult, and just accepting that all of it is me and not bringing any judgment around that or to that for the other person or for oneself.
Yeah, what a great point. And as we expand that consciousness, as you're suggesting too, that whole concept, like I am you or me, I have it in me and you have it in you. We may not express it, but that definitely opens the door to more compassion. And I think something all of us need to really understand, even the darkest of dark, like we have something within us and that can help us to understand. And again, looking to the soul is a journey that we don't judge. You can, but with the soul work, yeah, it's just the evolution of who we are. Awesome points, really awesome points. And as you go to put this book out into the world, what is your passion? What is your purpose for this? What's the overall mission?
I don't know if there's a mission per se, but there's a few factors. One of the biggest thing is just validating what others are going through, because I know that this is not unique to me, and there's a lot of people that have dropped in, often accidentally, maybe just doing psychedelics recreationally with friends, and it's, what is this? And there's a lot of confusion, and that may even create a negative narrative for people where this kind of engagement occurs, because often we as humans drop into negative mind streams, and then it's that can create a negative narrative about the other person without understanding what we're just talking about, how we are the mosaic of everything, both the light and the dark, and trying to work towards accepting that. So there's that. I also think it's important for us as humans to just explore the depth of who we are and what's possible. So that's a big piece of the book. We as humans are these amazing divine beings, and this is an inherent part of who we are. So let's explore that and see how deep we can go. So there's throwing out there that this psychonautic exploration of consciousness.
Psychonautic. Interesting word.
Yeah, basically, psychonautic is an exploration of consciousness, and it can be used or but not be done either working with psychedelics or possibly working with a variety of other means, whether it's meditation, using pain, or even working with sleep, journeying out of the body through lucid dreaming, and of course, those types of means as well.
Astral travel. I work in the Akashic realm,
Astral
past life.
travel, yeah.
I uncovered something about myself I'm working on in a past life, and it was like, whoa, no psychedelics, right? I think that one of the reasons I am like really wanting to talk to you and have this conversation is because it is taking a lot of my world and melding it in with the idea of how we can expand the consciousness using the psychedelics. And the fact that it's still illegal, right, in so many states and so many places, just like ridiculous. I've done it in so many ceremonies and sacredness, Native American churches and places like this, and so much healing can come forward. It really can. So I
Mhm.
do applaud you for stepping out and doing this. And you also, I just noticed too that like you're donating the proceeds to charity. What is that? What is that about?
It's one of those things where I think it's important to good, and for me, it's part of my integration, right? So it's as humans, we really have to ask ourselves, how much is enough? And I'm not a multimillionaire or anything like that, but I do, looking at my life, I have enough, and so how can I give? And when I do the work with psychedelics and facilitating sessions, I don't charge any money. So it's just extending this from the work to the book as a loving sharing for everybody and trying to contribute to making a shift of that in our society. I grew up in a Christian home, which is its own story, but volunteerism was really a big part of that. So this is also part of my heritage. And I've noticed too, when I offer things for free, there's so often a difficulty for people to accept that. And so it's trying to encourage this free, loving sharing that shows up at festivals like Burning Man and elsewhere. I'm hoping that this type of giving gains some momentum.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome for sure. So I'm sure there's more and more we could talk, but where can we find the book? Give a shout out to Inner Traditions for publishing it. Where would you like me to direct people?
There's a few different places. And I also, if people want to reach out and connect to me, I've created a Facebook page, the Psychedelic Mind Meld, where I'm hoping that people will join the group and share their telepathic experiences. And I'm also available as Wade Richardson on Facebook and open there for discussion and going deeper into this subject.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put all those links in the show notes as well. So, what a fascinating conversation. And I know we've said it, but I do like to come back and just close the show with the question of like, how do you feel that this work that you're doing, the idea of mind meld and psychedelics and opening up to telepathy, expanding consciousness, how do you feel it can help to empower the spirit right now?
I think it's a real big opportunity for humans to explore their porousness and their connection at a very divine, loving level. And that's what I'm hoping really comes from this and moves forward in terms of our deeper healing and loving connection.
Deeper healing and loving connection. And as we have already said, more compassion for ourselves and the
Yes.
world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. All the best of luck with your book, To Your Spirit.
Great. Thank you very much,
Namaste.
Terry. It's great to be
Yeah.
here, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Especially, I enjoy talking with people who have some depth in the healing and a background in working with energy. There's much more to relate to. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you too. Yes. Opening up and exploring consciousness with all the tools can lead to deeper healing and loving connections. Psychedelics is one way, but also having tools and techniques to integrate these lessons is highly recommended. Wade offers a significant opportunity for humanity to explore our interconnectedness and vulnerability on a profound, divine, and loving level. I share in his vision of this exploration as a way to foster deeper healing and enhance our capacity for loving connections. Having tools to integrate is very, very recommended. And if you are in need of creating a spiritual practice, reach out. I can help you with that. Schedule a spiritual upgrade breakthrough call with me, and let's talk about how you can build your spiritual toolbox just for you. Be sure to celebrate you and the love in your heart as you move through the rest of this month. Always, actually. Be sure to check out my website for all my upcoming programs, teachings, classes, and podcast episodes. Thanks again for listening. I am your host, Terry Ann Hyman. To your spirit, namaste.